Okay, today I'm at Fort Frederica. I want to tell you about the debacle at Racoon Gut. That happened on April 19th, 1778. It was during the Revolutionary War, the British versus the Americans. And the Americans had a problem. The Georgia Navy had a problem. There was the British privateers were off the coast of South Carolina and present-day Georgia, just robbing the merchant ships of the Americans. And it was a big issue. So the Americans got tired of it and tried to invade East Florida 2 times, but unsuccessful due to poor planning and cooperation of the local authorities of that area. So it failed twice. So on a 3rd attempt, Colonel Samuel Elbert was planning to invade for a 3rd time, but found out that the British was planning to invade St. Simons, so he put it on halt because they were planning to invade St. Simons in 1778. General Augustus Prevost was planning to do invasion. So the Georgia Navy decided to build 3 galleys in Savannah between 1776 and 1778 and use those as against the privateers off the coast of South Carolina, east of Florida. Back in that day in 1778, they only had 3 ways of really transportation or to fight battles. Was on the ocean, on the Kings High Road, which stretched between Fort McIntosh and Brantley County on the Satilla River to the Ottawa River, where Fort Howe was in McIntosh County. And also the final avenue for battle or movement was the rivers like this, rivers and tidal creeks in southeast Georgia. So the British found out that the Georgia Navy was purchasing 3 gallows to bring down here to protect the area. So they brought in their 4 ships into the St. Simons Sound. So Georgia had 4 galleys made in Savannah: the Lee, the Washington, the Bullock, and the Congress. And they were commanded by Oliver Bowen. In April 15, 1778, Elbert got word that the British were spotted off the coast of St. Simons. So from Fort Howe, which is on the Ottawa River in present-day McIntosh County, the Continental Battalion headquarters for the Revolutionary War sent 360 men from Fort Howe to march to Darien, which is probably a couple miles away. Because you got to think Fort Howe was in Cox, Georgia, and Darien's like right down the road, so it wasn't too far. And they boarded these 3 galleys and navigated them down the Ottawa River to Frederica River. So the people that captained these ships from Darien to Pike's Bluff over here, right about 1.5 miles up from where I am, Fort Frederica, from Darien up the Ottawa River into the Frederica River, which is north of St. Simons, was Captain Hardy of the Lee Archibald Hatcher of the Bullock, and John Coulter Braddock. They sailed the 3 galleys from Darien to Pike's Bluff, which is, they anchored the galleys right here. Pike's Bluff, you can see straight ahead of me. Pike's Bluff's probably 1/2 mile from here. And they anchored them and marched with 100 men from Pike's Bluff to where I am, Fort Frederica, with the British prisoners they had to lock them up in Fort Frederica. So the British got word that the Georgia Navy had 3 armed galleys and was about to go attack the British ships in the St. Simons Sound. So they got word from their spies that it was going to happen. So they got their 2 ships. Jordan Thomas got word from his spies that the Americans were planning to attack with their 3 galleys. So he decided to get 2 of his ships and send them up the Frederica River to attack the galleys before they had a chance to attack them. So Captain Jordan Thomas sent 2 of his ships of the Frederica River, the Rebecca and the Hitcherbrook, loaded with soldiers to face the galley. Of course, Elbert, which commanded the Georgia Navy, found out about it and decided to do a surprise attack on them. So he waited till the next day, because back then battles were fought in the daylight, not in dark. So he waited till 5:30 in the morning and attacked the Rebecca and the Hitcherbrook right here in the Frederica River, probably right where you see. The Rebecca and the Hitcherbrook was coming down the river to come attack Fort Frederica and the galleys. And the galleys began attacking the Hitcherbrook and Rebecca and the Hatter. They also had the Hatter with them too. And the galleys were lightly built craft powered by oars for rowing and put a disadvantage against the British ships, because the British ships, you said, at the time of the battle, the wind suddenly stopped. And then this gave the advantage to the Americans, and the tide also, the ebb tide, gave the advantage to the Americans. So the Americans was able to outflank them in the narrow. You see how narrow the Frederica River was, probably the same as it is now. And they couldn't maneuver, so they the galleys anchored about a half a mile away and just started opening up a cannon barrage on them. The British ships their plan was to go straight to the galleys and board them, just overpower them and come board them. But with no wind, they were stuck and they were ripe for attack. So the galleys, like I said, anchored a half a mile off and just started opening a cannon barrage on the British ships. The Hitcherbrook and the Rebecca only had 4-pounder guns, which are very small. And the Americans had 18, 12, and 9-pounders, which beat the crap out of their boats, which really busted holes in their ships. So they tried to get away. The British tried to get away from the galleys, but the river, they thought the river was deeper. The Frederica River was deeper, but it wasn't. So they ran aground in a place called Racoon Gut, which is like a bend further up. You see right here, right in there, and that's where Racoon Gut is. Just basically a bend in the Frederica River. And they got stuck. They tried to go down the river to get a breeze, to try to maneuver, but they couldn't. So they just gave up, and they abandoned their ships and their rescue boats and sailed back to the Galatea and left. I'll tell you about the American galleys, the Georgia Navy galleys that they had. They were made of wood, of course. They were 70 feet long, oar powered, 13 feet across, flat bottoms so they could go through shallow areas. Had triangular sails, had oars that were 22 feet long, heavy cannons on the end, each end, and smaller swivel cannons on each side. So that's why we had the advantage. We could outflank them, and they were trying to use traditional sailboats in this river right here, and you can tell it's probably too hard to turn. So we had the advantage. We had when the wind died, we could paddle our oars and blow them out of the water. So this really is a big victory for the Americans and the Georgia Navy. On April 19, 1778, during the Revolutionary War, like I said, it stopped the invasion of Fort Morris in Sunbury and Savannah for 8 months. Eventually they fell though, but it gave us time to have 8 more months. But we eventually won the war and they went away. But we also tried to invade Florida for the 3rd time, but it failed as well. So eventually the war ended and the United States became what it is today. Okay, I'm out here at St. Simon's Island near the pier. This is the St. Simon's Sound. It's between Jekyll Island and I'm on St. Simon's. This is where the 4 British ships docked on April 19th, 1778 during the Revolutionary War to try to attack St. Simon's. It was HMS Hitchenbrook, HMS Galatea, Rebecca, and the Hatter. They anchored here. The Hatter, the Rebecca, and the Hitchenbrook ended up going down the Frederica River down that way and got captured by the Americans. And the crew came back to the Galatea, which was anchored here, their flagship, commanded by Captain Jordan Thomas, and they tore out that way because they retreated from the Americans. Okay, this is where huge victory during the Revolutionary War for the Georgia Navy of the United States on the Frederica River, called the Debacle of Racoon Gut, or the Frederica Naval Action. Took place on the Frederica River, right down below Fort Frederica. As you can see, Pike's Bluff is where the galleys were anchored. Frederica River is right there that the whole action took place on, and you see Fort Frederica in the blue marker. And Racoon Gut was a little bend in the river you see down there on the left-hand side. That's where the boats got grounded because it was too shallow. The tide was probably going out. Circle marker for the Georgia Navy from the Frederica Naval Action. A very good victory for us over here in the Frederica River during the Revolutionary War, where we defeated the British in the Frederica River. Really interesting, really awesome. Gave us boosted our morale, the Patriots' morale during that war. Okay, today I'm at Fort Frederica on the Frederica River on St. Simon's Island, Georgia, and I want to tell you about the Debacle of Racoon Gut, also known as the Frederica Naval Action during the Revolutionary War. It happened on April 19, 1778. The background is the British were raiding American merchant ships off the coast of South Carolina and present-day Georgia. So the Americans retaliated by trying to invade East Florida 2 separate times, but failed due to poor communications and lack of cooperation with local authorities. So there was going to be a third attempt led by Colonel Samuel Elbert in 1778, but he found out about a plan through intelligence that the British were going to invade St. Simon's in 1778, led by General Augustus Prevost. So he decided to wait. So we heard about these 4 ships. I'll give you the names of these 4 ships, the British ships. 2 of them were private ships, the sloop Rebecca and the brig Hatter, which were 2 private vessels under contract. And the other 2 was a frigate named HMS Galatea and the sloop HMS Hitchinbrook, Royal ships. So there's 4 of them, and they were the ones that plundered the American ships off the coast. So when they found out they anchored in St. Simon's Sound, near where the present-day lighthouse is, the Continental Congress decided to build 3 galleys armed to defend this area.